Hi everybody, I'm Naomi. I'm a speech therapist, and today I'm going to talk about self-reg and reframe. In our short time together, I'll be talking about what self-reg is. We'll be also talking about ways to recognize stresses, the 5 steps of self-reg, and I'll be zeroing in on the first of the 5 steps of self-reg, which is reframe. And lastly, we're going to end off with some practice on how we can apply reframing to our everyday life. Are you ready? Let's dive in. So what is self-reg? So Schenkel self-reg is a process for enhancing self-regulation by understanding and dealing with stress. In self-reg, we consider both our responses to stress and our underlying state of energy and tension when we encounter a stress. Stress can be anything that causes energy expenditure in order to bring the system back into optimal state. So imagine the temperature fluctuation in our everyday environment, that should also cause our body temperature to fluctuate just about that right amount, right? But no, our body temperature have heating and cooling mechanisms to help keep our body temperature constant. These heating and cooling mechanisms burn energy in order to keep that equilibrium. So in self-reg, the definition of stress surrounds the idea of maintaining that bodily equilibrium and not as what our mainstream media is portraying, that it is from the stress of financial limitations or stress because there is difficulties fulfilling job expectations. So knowing all these stresses cause our energy and tension to sort of deplete. So are we able to recognize these stresses in our everyday life? But just before we dive deep into recognizing stresses, I thought I would be really clear about defining what a stress is. So, a stress is something that requires us to burn energy to remain operating at our functional best. So, say if I'm a little bit sensitive to loud noise, and whenever someone uses a loud voice or makes a loud sound, that saps a little bit of my energy. So, a little by a little throughout the day, my energy is sapped whenever I hear a loud sound. So, if I'm going to have a busy day out in the shopping mall, you bet I would be really tired by the end of that shopping trip. In self-reg, there are 5 domains in which these stresses can be classified: biological, emotional, social, prosocial, and cognitive. Let's dive deep into each of these domains through a shopping example. So if I were to go to the shopping mall to buy some Christmas presents, the noise, the crowd, and the amount of visual stimulation may perk me up, but sometimes I think it pushes me a little over to being overwhelmed. Emotionally, I can get excited and look forward to buy things for the people that I love in this season. Socially, I have to be thoughtful and balance what my shopping partner wants to achieve in this shopping trip as well. Pro-socially, I'm buying things for my friends' kids, and it is important to buy presents that not only pleases the kid but also the parents too. So cognitively, as you would have understood, that I'm constantly wandering around the shopping mall, constantly checking off my budget and the name list and my shopping partner, making sure that I've got everybody covered. And this is such a cognitive task. No one would have thought that shopping would be so stressful, right? But it is important to realize that each of these domains actually interact with each other, and sometimes they actually have a multiplying effect. So if I'm really bothered by large crowd and loud noises, I may not last for long in a shopping mall to make sure that everybody has a present in my tick box. So as you can tell from my shopping example, that every time we experience stress, it takes a bit of energy from us. And over the course of the day, we expend energy coping with various stress in our environment. And as we do that, we get lower on the y-axis and we become low in our energy. And over time, we go on towards the right side of this graph and we become high in our tension, our bodily tension. So this is where we have less capacity to cope with stress. And when the next stress hits us, we might not be able to keep it in anymore. So what do we do when we can't keep it in? Well, thankfully, it's never too late to start on our self-reg journey. Self-reg is not a program. It is an ongoing, lifelong process of understanding stress behavior and involves interrelated practices of maintaining a healthy energy tension balance. So what's involved in this self-reg process? There are 5 main steps in this process. First, we want to reframe the behavior. Next, we want to recognize the stressors. We want to also reduce the stress. And fourthly, we want to reflect. So we want to have a better awareness of what is causing the stress so that we are better prepared for it the next time round. And lastly, we want to restore energy. So when we are thinking about where this stress is coming from, we are constantly thinking across the 5 domains that we have talked about earlier: the biological, the social, the pro-social, the cognitive, and the emotion. So self-reg includes recognizing what calm feels like for ourselves, as well as what it feels like to be overstressed. So the ultimate self-reg goal is to help children acquire the necessary understanding of when and how to manage their own energy and tension so that they can adapt to the ever-changing and increasing stresses of their life. But self-reg can be personal too. If we are going to land the children outcome, we first have to understand our own stress and know how to manage our own energy and tension. So let's dive deep into step 1 of the whole process. Step 1 is reframe. So when we reframe, we are taking off our cognitive blinders and looking at behavior through a different lens, one that is respectful and informed by brain science. So in all, self-reg helps us to understand and respond to roots of behavior, learning, motivation, and social problems in children. But not just that, in adults as well. There is a quote by Dr. Stuart Schenker where he says that there is no such thing as a bad kid. A child, if possible, doesn't willingly choose to misbehave. That's really interesting, isn't it? In self-reg, we pause. We are constantly considering a child's underlying state of energy and tension, especially if they encounter a stress. If an impending challenge causes a large amount of tension, and if they happen to be in a low energy state at that moment, then they will have little capacity to meet that challenge. This high stress load may cause a stress behavior. The behavior that we observe was a result of stress behavior and not misbehavior. So in self-reg, we often pause to ask, why am I seeing this behavior and why now, before we respond. Yes, you heard me right. I mentioned brain science. So what happens in the brain? When the child is in a state of calm, the blue part of the brain, the prefrontal cortex or the neocortex, is online, represented by my hand model here. And when it is online, they can learn and think. However, when we have a child that is stressed, they dysregulate. So their brains flip the lid and the red part of the brain is now online and it sends distress signal to the child to fight, flight, or freeze. So when this happens, the child has very little ability to think rationally and learn well because this blue part of the brain is offline now and they have very little capacity to be thinking about their action. So in self-reg, a clear distinction is drawn between misbehavior and stress behavior. In misbehavior, a child knows what he is doing, But in stress behavior, because they have limited ability to access the thinking parts of their brain, the child has little ability to choose their action. In misbehavior, their thinking part of the brain is lit up and the child is schemingly planning. But in stress behavior, if we were to put that same kid through an MRI, we will be able to see that the subcortex is lit up and they have very little access to the prefrontal cortex. Similarly, in misbehavior, they have access to all parts of their brain because they are thinking. And in stress behavior, they are just reacting in fight, flight, or freeze. So their limbic alarm is sounding and the thinking part of the brain is really not registering what the consequences might be or should be, and they are just responding to get themselves out of trouble. And so now is a very timely place for us to put what we have learned into practice, and let's practice reframing. So here there are some scenarios that we can try to apply reframing on. So firstly, we have a child that is task avoidant. What can we be thinking about? It could be the case that the homework and that challenge that is required from this child is beyond the challenge that he can afford at that moment in time, and he is really under stress. And when he's stressed, he's not able to give his best and be able to cope with what the situation requires. So you would see that the child is trying to avoid that task. So that cognitive load is too difficult for them to handle. How about a child that is tantruming? What's your thoughts on that? When a child tantrums, she is under stress. She says, I'm struggling. I need your help. Your love to feel safe again and I'm hurting. She's not choosing to react this way. So they are actually seeking for a connection. And what are your thoughts on a kid that hits? For a child that hits, emotionally it is so overwhelming for them, and that the language, their access for language goes to the background, and they are not able to access the language that they have. So they are too emotional and they cannot express what they are feeling and thinking in words at that point in time. This is why they hit. And how about the last scenario, lying? What are your thoughts on lying? They may have started avoiding telling the truth, but as we pursue the matter, they become stressed. And that extreme limbic arousal, that red brain, causes the child to tell tales as they see that as the truth. And they confabulate and they imagine something that is so out of the world that can really distort their image and their understanding of truth, and this can be so ingrained and it becomes a real truth themselves. Wow, what a surprise. I bet you never thought of it that way. So thank you for joining me in this journey, and I hope you have a better understanding of what self-reg is and how to reframe to sort of take off our cognitive blinders to see the child and really understand why they give us such behavior. And we really want to be understanding the energy and the tension that is the undercurrent within the child at any one point in time. And when we do have a clear understanding of the energy and the tension, that gives us a better understanding of the child and what they are capable of in that moment. So if we are able to tune into that, we will be able to help that child thrive so much better. All right. So I hope you have fun like I did, and we'll see you in the next episode. Bye bye.